Diana is a really amazing blaster, but there is one flaw in my opinion, and that is that they didn't Loctite the motor screws. Because these aren't Loctited and there's so much torque and so much power going through them, at times they will come loose and do need maintenance by retightening them, but we instead are going to solve the problem with Loctite. The same thing can be said for the pusher, which threads together in 2 halves and does have a tendency to unthread over time, so we're going to put a little bit of blue Loctite there as well. You're going to need a couple things for this. First, I'm going to recommend both a metric and a US standard set of Allen keys, and then you're going to need some Loctite, and for this we're going to recommend Loctite Red. You also can use Loctite Blue, but a little bit more on that in a moment. First, you're going to take an M2.5 and loosen the 4 top screws to remove the top of the blaster. Then you're going to take an M2 and remove the 2 front screws so you can remove the top slide. Lastly, you're going to take your same M2 driver and remove 1 screw from the rear of the blaster. At this point, your top slide should sort of lever open, and you do want to be gentle with the wires inside. Feel free to take these screws out completely. This is a good time to blow out the insides. If you've got any dart residue, it's a good idea to clean it out. This blaster has a really elegant design. You see this tiny little pusher back here, nice PCB up front, faux barrel through the center, brushless motors, and all the control circuitry is split up into 2 sides here. Pretty neat. Now you're going to take an M1.5 driver and you're going to carefully remove these screws. If you find they're too tight or stripping out, one of the things you can try is to grab a US standard version and grab the size that's closest that might be able to get in. Obviously, if your screws are really tight, you probably don't need to actually remove them and do this, but this is a great maintenance tip overall if you find your cage or screws are a little loose. Now that I've got the first screw out, I'm going to put a very tiny amount of red on here. And what you're going to want to do is essentially put some on here and then take most of it off. Due to the small screw size, using red here is actually a little bit more like using blue on a larger screw. Now, if you want to be conservative, you certainly can use blue thread locker. It won't hold as tightly, but it does work. And then you're just going to put that back in your flywheels. You want to be really sure that when you're doing these motor screws, you're not putting any excess. You don't want any to bleed into the motor windings or anything like that. So just enough to lightly coat the screw, and really the best way to do that is to wipe it off using a piece of towel. Now repeat for the other 7 screws and you're done with this step. Now we're going to remove the solenoid to thread lock that as well. To do so, you're going to take your M2 driver and you're going to remove those 2 screws on the sight here. They very cleverly use the sight to hold the solenoid in place. Now that that's loose, that will pop right out, and then you're gently going to want to unthread this from itself. Mind, there is an O-ring there that you don't want to lose, so keep that close and handy. You'll want to clean that up before you reinstall it. Then you can pull the actual pusher out entirely, set the spring aside, and then we want to gently take these 2 parts apart. If you're unable to thread these 2 parts with light pressure, stop right here and don't do anything. If you're able to get those 2 parts apart, then I would recommend you actually Loctite the 2 together with some blue thread locker. However, in this one, this seems to be really tight, so I'm not going to mess with it any more than I have already. Then I'm going to wipe off this pusher a little bit and put it back in place. Then we're going to seat our pusher back in. The logo should be up like this. Gently flip it around, minding the wiring there, and we're going to put the top mount back on to hold it in place. Now that we've got that secured, we're going to go ahead and close up the blaster. Put all of our screws back, and we are ready to test the blaster again. Hope this has been helpful. I really love this blaster. I can't wait to see what they do next. And we have a whole host of accessories coming for this blaster as well. One great accessory we already have, in addition to the holsters and the magazines, is a cutting guide so that you can take worker Nightingale magazines and make them work perfectly with this blaster.